Hello, welcome back to Firehouse Stories. I'm Bob, this is Doug, and we tell you behind the scenes stories of the fire service and people involved in the fire service. As you've noticed, if you started from our very first posting, that we're starting to go high tech. You know, our second posting, we've done it in front of a green screen, and now we're working on trying to figure out something to put on there.
On the green.
Yeah, but I think it goes good with especially Doug's complexion.
I think just a picture of me.
Well, as we said before, Doug and I are second generation firefighters. Our fathers were firefighters before us. Doug's father in the city that Doug and I had a job in, and my father was a firefighter in a different city. And today we're going to tell a couple of stories about from their era. And one of them was when I first started on the fire department. Doug's father was my platoon chief, and he was a legend. Honest to gosh, you know, he told things square and straight, and you better be that way.
You knew where you stood with him.
Absolutely. And we had an incident where we have a river that runs through the city, and in the springtime it really rages, and there's canoeists went down and they flipped, and they got climbing up a tree there, you know, where the river had overflown the banks to, and our fire rescue boat was a hard-hauled boat at that time. And it went over and it flipped, and it ended up, one of our guys ended up in one of the same trees as the two people that we had to rescue, and we couldn't get them out. That was our first and last trip. So we were on better footing with the USA at that time, and
Much better.
called for a helicopter, and a U.S. Marine helicopter came in from Selfridge Air Force Base and pulled these three people out of the tree. So at the next union meeting, you know, there was a lot of grumbling about, you know, having this boat and not having the tools to do the job.
And the fact of almost losing one of our own.
Exactly. You know, a lot of grumbling on it. And not only that, but they've been going to the city the last 2 or 3 years to put in for a Zodiac, you know, one of those things you blow up on the side. I think it was like $2,500 back then.
Yeah, it would have been a lot of money, I suppose.
Big budget item, you know, with a city with 10 fire stations. But anyways, everybody at the union meeting got up and had a say about, you know, how horrible it was. We didn't have the tools, or, you know, we've just about lost our guy, and so on and so forth. And it went on for about 20 minutes, and finally Bruce stood up to put a exclamation mark to the whole thing. He says, listen, if you go to City Hall now and demand it, he says, they'll give you the Queen Mary. He says, if you go in 3 weeks, they'll tell you to use a pair of fucking stilts.
Isn't that the truth, eh?
And that was Bruce.
Yeah,
that was Bruce.
I remember him at a union meeting one time when we got new shirts, and he said, yeah, they're so goddamn cheap and thin. He said, you can piss through them and not break the stream. It's like, I did. I asked him one time, Bob, I said, do you lie in bed at night thinking about things to say or lines to come up with?
Well, his favorite one, as a matter of fact, I took it as a term of endearment, was you and syphilitic son of a bitch.
Syphilitic.
Yeah. Anyways, he was quite a character, and we got a story about Doug's dad today.
Yeah, well, because he was a legend on the fire department, and when he passed away, my sister had his ashes, and she didn't know what to do. And he was a big man. You got to understand, he was like 6'7", 365 pounds most of his life. And she had a lot of ashes, and she didn't know what to do with them. So she said, Doug, can you help me out? She said, I don't know what to do with Dad's ash. She said, I want to be respectful. But she said, I got so many. She said, I spread them around different areas that I thought you might be interested in. I don't know, would you please?
She thought he'd smell her flowers.
I don't know. She said, would you please help me with them? And I said, sure. I said, give them to me. I said, I'll spread them around the fire hall or something. So she gave me a bag. Well, I said, I didn't say I'd take them all. And she said, that's not all of them. Like, and it was a fairly good sized bag.
How big was it?
Ziploc, you know.
Yeah.
So anyways,
I
said, I'll get rid of them. I said, I'll give them a respectful ride or something. I don't know. I took him into the fire station that I was working at the time, and I waited till the guys had done the morning check on the vehicles and then what have you, and they've gone in for their coffee. I slipped out to my truck and I got my dad out of the door. He put the Ziploc bag inside the door of the truck. Anyways, I go out, I come inside, and I get up on the pumper, and it's got a hard platform on the top above the hose. So I spread different things on it. I put dots and made a big O, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I still look at the bag, and I still got lots. So I got the whole top of the pumper all covered. Oh, geez. So I was riding the aerial truck as the captain on the aerial. So I thought, well, I'll just go over there and put it up on the turntable. So I went over on the aerial.
Turntable's at the very back of the truck.
Yeah, it's where the ladder goes up. The bottom of the ladder is the turntable, so you can pivot. Anyhow, I get up on top, and I spread Dad around on it, and I still look at the bag, and where am I going? So I go walking along the ladder. Now you got to understand the ladder's really close to the ceiling, so you got to keep your head down low and kind of climb along the ladder to the cab. So behind the cab there's a big space of flat area. So I just dumped the rest of them in there.
Is that where the operator stands?
No, the operator stands on the turntable.
Oh, the turntable at the back. Yeah, okay.
Where the controls are, and that's all covered. I got my dad all over it. I got on top of the bumper. I got him everywhere. Anyways, I go in and I get my coffee and I sit down with the boys and we're having our coffee, morning coffee. Now tones come in and the pump's going out downtown and the aerial's not going with them. So as I always did, I went out and I would give them a salute as they were heading out the door. So I did the same thing as I always did. The guys didn't know Bruce was on the top of the pumper. I look as they're heading down the road, down the highway, and the dust is blowing. Bruce is blowing all over the cars going down the highway, all over the road.
The cars behind had to turn their headlights on.
Oh, it wasn't that bad.
Oh, okay.
God.
No, I won't exaggerate it.
No, not at all.
No.
Anyways, he's going. I thought, well, no, Dad's going to like that ride. That's a good ride for him. And so I go back in and I have my coffee and the pump finally comes back. I said to the guys, I said, we got a public school tour to do. They want us they're going to test their fire alarm system and their evacuation. And we're just going to stand by and watch them and see if there's any suggestions that we have for them with their evacuation. Anyhow, we go out at about 9:30 in the morning, and the pump's driving down the road ahead of us. I'm looking at it. What's coming off the top of the pump? And I realize Bruce is still going the other way now. He's still on top. He's still blowing off the top of the pumper.
As you're coming back?
No, as we're going to the school.
Yeah, I got you, yeah.
And then I thought, oh, what about him off the truck? So I leaned forward and I looked in the mirror of the aerial truck, and sure enough, he's blowing all over the cars behind the aerial truck. I think he's having a hoot. He's not wanting to leave too easy, but he's still holding on. Anyhow, we get to this public school, and they do the fire drill. And I said to the principal, I said, listen, I said, if you want the elementary classes, the junior classes, I said, if you want to let them out by the fence here, I said, we'll pull the pumper over and we'll give them a little display of the tools and stuff. Oh, he said they'd really like that. So the kids all came out and they're all sitting cross-legged on the grass on the other side of the chain link fence, and the pump's in the parking lot. And the guys are taking the nozzles off and showing them different tools on the sides of the trucks. The kids are all wide-eyed and everything. I saw my driver standing over there doing nothing. So I said to him, I said, hey, Mike. I said, come here. And he comes over. He said, what's up, Cap? And I said, you want to take the pump or the aerial truck and put it on the other side of the pump? I said, put the ladder up. I said, maybe swing it around. I said, maybe we'll get the junior guy to climb the ladder and take a picture, an aerial view, down on the kids and on the grass. And he said, oh, sure, that'd be a great idea. So I said, you need a hand? He said, no. He said, I'm good. I said, okay. So he goes and he drives the truck and he parks it behind the pump. And he gets up on the turntable. I see him climbing up on the turntable. I'm just going to keep an eye on him because I don't know if he can do this on his own or if he needs me to help him. But he got up on the turntable and he's looking around, and I thought, what's he looking at? And I'm trying to figure out if there's something. And I thought, oh, it's Bruce. He's still on the turntable.
There's still dust up there.
With that, he goes and he kicks him. And the dust blows across the top of the pumper, over top of all the kids on the grass.
They're all looking up.
All this dust, and I'm like, and he's kicking the snot on my dad. I'm like, hey, back off, buddy, back off, like that. Anyways, Bruce, he would have liked that last ride.
So did you tell him, like, when he got back, that what he did, or did you?
Well, no, I didn't say anything to him. I didn't even ask him what he was kicking. But what we did, about 6 months later, his dad, who was a firefighter in the same city, passed. And he had his ashes, and he said to me, he said, hey, Cap, he said, I don't know, I got my dad's ashes. I don't know what to do with it. I said, well, bring them in, put them on the turntable, and I'll kick them all over the place. And he looked at me and said, what are you talking about? I said, that's what you did to my dad. Was that your dad's ashes? I said, yeah. And so we started laughing and made light of it. But it's still tough. It's tough. But yeah, Bruce, he would have liked that ride.
Yeah, that would have been Bruce's last ride, but that would have been good for him.
Jeez, yeah.
You know, our dads, they started in the 50s, early 50s, and came up through, and different time, different environment. A lot of people from World War II were part of it. Tough people, and this human resources stuff that we have really didn't count a whole lot. But my dad liked to pull practical jokes. And we had really good relations there's about 4 neighbors across the street. And this was probably the mid-60s, 64. And our next door neighbor, this guy had a big booming voice. And he'd always start off his stuff with, I'm here to tell you, Doug.
Is this your dad that had the booming?
No, it's our next door neighbor had that. But he bought a Vauxhall.
What?
Vauxhall. You remember those cars, those little English cars? We used to call them puddle jumpers. Well, they were the first small cars that came into North America. Yeah. And people that bought them were sort of ridiculed, It's like sort of in our time with a smart car, right? But he bought it because he wanted a second car and he wanted good gas mileage. Well, Dad would be sitting out in the back and Ray would come over and he'd say, I'm here to tell you, Cliff. He says, I'm getting 37 miles a gallon on that Vauxhall. So Dad gets it in his head. He's going to help him out a little bit.
Sure.
So every 2 or 3 nights, he would go over and he'd put a gallon or 2 of gas in the gas tank. And this went on for like 3 or 4 months across the summer, right? And Ray would come out and say, oh boy, I'm here to tell you. I'm here to tell you. I was up to 56. I'm up to 56. And that's city, Cliff. That's city. Dad would go, oh my God.
And how much were they paying for a gallon of gas back then?
Oh, it was like 25 cents.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyways, Dad did this, like I said, for about 3 or 4 months after he first got the car and was really proud of his gas mileage. And then he thought, well, okay, I've sort of, spent probably $4 on him on gas. I better get some of that back.
Yeah. So
he started going over there at night and siphoning
it
out of his tank. And we would come over and say, hey, Cliff. Dad would say, hey, how you doing? I said, well, pretty good. He says, how's your car? He says, I don't know, Cliff. I'm here to tell you it's not. And always was, I'm here to tell you it's not good. The gas mileage, something must be wrong. He says, well, what are you getting? He says, I'm down to 24. And so he says, maybe there's something, you just blow it out, right? And he did this, I think, for about, until he had 2 or 3 encounters with Ray, and then he thought he let him off the hook. And then he stopped, and then Ray got up to his real gas mileage, whatever that was.
That's funny.
Yeah, but that's what firefighters are like. We like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to be with you every Friday, posting a new story. So if you want to subscribe to it, and we'll just come directly to your mailbox every time we post a new story. Hit your like button if you'd like, And we'll see you next Friday.
Well, you would like.
Would you like it?
Yeah, sure.
You'd like that? I'd like that too. Is that still on?
I don't know. It's your camera. Is it on?